Hi guys, welcome to Open Mic Night. I'm your host and truly honest towards professional wrestling, Gavin Nuts Fletcher. I'm going to give you honesty towards professional wrestling. None of this corporate BS, because at the end of the day, I sit in my bedroom at the age of 42 talking to professional wrestling to the world. You know, people do have glorious background, I don't. I just have a curtain, a slopey roof, and a speaker that side. You know, but it is what it is, eh? You win some, you lose some. I don't have a studio as such, but I have a good setup. Matter of speaking, a good setup. It'd probably be dated knowing my luck. You know, I don't keep up with the times, but I digress. Hope everyone's having a good Sunday anyway. You know, thank you ever so much for the people that have actually interacted with me all over social media, for liking my videos, sharing my videos. End of the day, that's what it's all about. You know, sharing your opinions towards professional wrestling. Now, professional wrestling for me, for many, many years, has been my escapism towards my personal life. At the moment, my mum's laid up in the hospital, fighting an infection and an allergic reaction. She's having more tests done. You know, and before people bitch and moan at me, oh, you should be going to visit her. Hey, it's past visiting hours now. You know, she's on the mend, guys, but I've told certain people, now I'm telling the world. You know, because at the end of the day, I use that towards my escapism. Through that, through obviously not having a job, because at the end of the day, I enjoy talking about professional wrestling. You know, I'm passionate about professional wrestling. That's why I do content here on YouTube. I do content on TikTok, you know, because at the end of the day, people interact with me so well on TikTok, you know. And I wish people here on YouTube would do the same thing, even though YouTube, I would say, I do get comments now and again, but not on this platform. I finally got my first comment towards my SmackDown review. You know, I'm grateful for the people that are actually making an effort to interact with me on the comments, you know. And I tell you one thing, I really, really am grateful when people do that. You know, because at the end of the day, you love to share your passion towards professional wrestling, even if it's cosplay, even if it's towards watching it or collecting merchandise. End of the day, you have that buzz, that thrill towards the love and the passion of professional wrestling. And that's what it's all about. You know, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of negative towards professional wrestling. People that are pro against it. I sort of respect their values towards it, but if they hinder me, nah, it's not happening. Because you guys, why does my hands always look dirty in this light? Look, looks like I've wiped my arse without the tissue. You know, but I digress. I do wash my hands after going to the toilet, by the way. Can't stress you enough. But what I'm saying is, everyone's passionate towards professional wrestling in different ways. If people thought the same thing, it would be a boring watch, wouldn't it? You could just imagine it, and you could just imagine it if everyone thought the same in this world. You know, it really throws me when people trying to change your opinion, but it doesn't work, but you try and change their opinion, that doesn't work, and then back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You know, people don't understand when people say criticism. It's not criticism when it comes to a wrestling fan. You know, you can follow whatever you want as a professional wrestling fan. You know, because at the end of the day, wrestling is a good art form. You know, it's in the name. Entertainment. I know that's WWE. TNA bring it their way. Ring of Honor bring it their way. AEW bring it their way. New Japan Pro Wrestling bring it that way. But I know WWE never ever have classed themselves as a wrestling company. It's kind of retarded when you think about it. When you actually think about it, when they don't class themselves as a wrestling company, even they're producing wrestling content and merchandise and everything. I tell you one thing I do actually miss. Wrestling magazines from like WWE. You know, I wish AEW would do it. You know, bring back the nostalgia to give that entity towards professional wrestling. And I know this day and age it probably costs a lot to print off an actual magazine because there's not many wrestling magazines out there now. I don't even know if Fighter Spirit magazine's still out. You know, it's been that long since I picked up one. Last time I picked up a wrestling magazine was my Roddy Piper tribute one from 2015. That's when WWE actually gave a shit about their fans. You know, because at the end of the day, it was a nice magazine they put together to tribute the late great Roddy Piper. They should do that for all professional wrestlers. You know, it's amazing how quick they brought that out in a quick turnaround. You know, since his death, I think they did that in the space of a couple of months, if that. Oh, my chair's so uncomfortable today, guys. But obviously, today's Sunday, the 18th of May. And I'll tell you one thing. Right, I've already talked about it on my SmackDown review as such. You know, I tell you one thing with Jeff Cobb in WWE with his name change. I class it as a nickname more than a name change as such. And that's just me being honest with you. Tell me your thoughts, how you think about the name change. But I tell you one thing, right? I want to actually say this. As a wrestling fan, right? I don't mind name changes when it comes to wrestling. If it makes sense. You know, if it makes sense, it makes sense. The only weird name that I can actually think of at the moment, and that's me being honest with you, is the Rated R Cope. Adam Copeland's character in, or gimmick you want to class it as, in AEW. It's laughable, don't get me wrong, but and what's in a name? What's in a name these days? You know, when you literally think about it. You know, the thing is, when I've said this for many times, when it comes to wrestling belts, technically it means nothing to the company unless you can sell that product, what they put in front of them. You know, if they've got a certain name change and it doesn't work with the crowd, it doesn't work with them, it won't work with the belt. You know, the wrestler makes the belt, not the belt makes the wrestler. Even though, yes, the wrestler has that much history towards that belt, I feel like when you look at it in the bigger picture, you have to have the right name for the right character. You know, some names can be laughable. Like I was just saying, Adam Copeland's character. You know, that's just an example. You know, not direct at him as a person. He relies on his history, I feel. Being honest with you, I think he relies on his history, what he's done with past companies, such as the WWE, through the feuds he had with the likes of John Cena, etc., etc., etc. You know, to build that character for him. But if he was basically an out-and-out wrestler that's just gone to AEW, that it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work, I feel. Even though he's got that history behind him, which is perfect to have. Don't get me wrong, that's not me knocking him. But that's what I mean, you've got to get the name right to work for the wrestler. You know, you could evenly do these death-defying moves, or oh my god moments, or holy shit moments, or stuff like that, and people will remember you for that. But if you haven't got a catchy name or something other than just a catchphrase, because I feel like sometimes wrestlers rely on the catchphrase to be remembered, like I've mentioned in a previous upload. But when you look at the name changes, when a wrestler changes their name, I don't blame them if it works. You know, people thought it was laughable when Prince Devitt changed his name to Finn Balor. You know, this was Fergal Devitt. You know, I'm glad he didn't use his birth name. This is not me being harsh towards the guy. But he made that name worthwhile and synonymous throughout the WWE. You look at the likes of Tyler Black had to change his name to Seth Rollins. That literally rolled off the tongue a lot better than you think. You know, because people remember him for what he does. You got Jonathan Good, who changed his name to Dean Ambrose, and John Moxley when he went to AEW. You know, that worked because, yeah, fair enough, Jonathan Good literally had John Moxley on the Indies. That's what benefited him, even though he had his experience in WWE. You know? And to say certain wrestlers actually changed their birth name to their wrestling name, which is good when they actually have that momentum going. You wouldn't think the likes of Roman Reigns would actually. I can't remember his real name. Do you think it would have rolled off the tongue? Same with Jacob Fatu. You know, I'm really surprised he actually kept his name. Solo Sikoa, I think he actually changed his name from his birth name. But then you think about it in the logical sense. You've got the hardest thing is to be a professional wrestler. You've built up your wrestling career in the indies. Then you go to the mainstream saying you relied on the name that you built up, but people got to resonate with the new name that you give them. I bet that's the hardest thing to do. You know, minus all the storylines, minus all the matches. You try and sell yourself on a piece of paper that name that you've been given, or you've picked yourself. The one that I do like, you know, I've named a few I've actually liked over the years, and obviously one I don't like, and that's just me being honest. You look at the likes of Kevin Owens. He was Kevin Steen on the independent scene. Yes, we know it's a tribute to his son as well as the late great Owen Hart. We know that. Sentimental value, granted. But for him to build up his character like he once was as Kevin Steen, it's like a fresh coat of paint. I always say with the WWE and somewhat AEW as well, it's the cut, copy and paste situation. You cut out from the indies, you paste it, you copy from what you've learned from the indies, but you paste in what you learn with the WWE or AEW, for example, and then you put your stamp of approval onto that, is towards building up your name once again. You know, I know if you relied on your independent background, which a lot of wrestlers have, don't get me wrong, which is beneficial for them, but it's hard to build up a name in professional wrestling in this day and age. I look at 2025, you know, no disrespect to who's doing the Weekend Warriors of the independent scene. You look at Kip Sabian, a prime example, right? He's mainly working AEW with the likes of Christian Cage. And you look at the likes of Nick Wayne. You know, that feud has brought up that name, you know. That's what I mean. It's weird when you think about it. Eddie Kingston was overlooked massively. He chose AEW, don't get me wrong. But to sell yourself on a piece of paper, one thing, just say, that's your resume or your CV, what you've learnt on the independent scene. Fine, you could have lists of matches. You could have 5-star matches voted by fans, not Dave Meltzer for crying out loud. But, I mean, for you to sell yourself, you got to sell yourself well in matches. And you've got to literally see the crowd reaction. You react what the crowd are reacting to. You know, that's how it's wrestling folklore. You know, but I look at the way, when I look at the size of the likes of WWE, the plethora of talent they've got, like I've mentioned in the previous upload, that the whole weight on the company at the moment is on Seth Rollins, on his back, for being the front runner of the likes of Monday Night Raw. Is he providing what we needed? Is it because of WWE's fault the way he's been drizzling shits? I don't know. But that's what I mean. It's like you look at these wrestlers. Yeah, you could have like a resume or CV as we know, curriculum vitae, or you got cage match for all your matches that you ever have. But you to build up your name to get yourself noticed and then put in the mainstream scene and then rebranded the way the mainstream see fit. You've got to work on that name. Like I've mentioned already, yeah, you can rely on what you've actually had in the past. But once you go to the mainstream scene, it's different. Yeah, it may be the same thing what's in the ring, but you just think what you've got, the glitz and the glamour, the lights in your face, to make it work. If you don't make it work, you're released before you know it. That's why I feel sorry for these wrestlers that sign with likes of WWE. They're the yes people, the yes man or the yes woman, or the yes tag team. They agree to everything what WWE throw at them. You know, if they disagree, you really think they'd be sitting there on the job? Not a chance. You know, at least one thing I would say this: AEW gives them more frame than WWE ever did, and that's not just comparing. That's facts. But I look at the bigger spectrum. I look at the bigger spectrum. What's in the name change? What could actually appeal to that wrestler? Or you're gonna have that gimmick. You're gonna work. Tell you one thing. One of the biggest risks, and it's highly under the radar. Julia Hart. Yeah, Julia Hart. When she literally first joined AEW, she was a cheerleader, and then she went on the dark side when it was the House of Black. You know, the likes of Malachi Black, who's now gone back to WWE. You got the likes of Buddy Murphy. You've got the likes of Rhea Ripley's fella. Is that Buddy Murphy? No. I do apologise. Well, him anyway. Right? It works. It was a big risk, but it worked. You look at Natalya right now. She's literally doing shows. Right? Yeah. Being face of the WWE. But her promo, the way it was just bloody amazing. You know, I'm mesmerised. She rebranded herself as Natty. You know, she can't go under Natalya because she'll probably have to pay copyrights to WWE to use that name. So she's gone back to Natty Neidhart or Natty. She reinvented herself. Needs to be on the mainstream scene, that is. You know, I know the rumours and speculations within the last 24 hours she could be fired from the WWE. But it could be a work anyway. But what I'm saying to you guys is to make wrestlers... when wrestlers keep their name from the independent scene and they're allowed to use it and WWE don't slap a copyright or AEW don't slap a copyright on it, which I don't think AEW does and Tony Khan normally does anyway. But it has to work. You know, JC Matteo works for me. You know, it feels like I've said in my SmackDown review, it feels like a nickname more than a name change, which is good, don't get me wrong. But you look how many wrestlers have failed with weird gimmicks and name changes. That doesn't work. Even though the brainchild thinks it would work. You know? It just blows my mind. It just blows my mind where some of the gimmicks they think up. You know, and I'll tell you one thing though, guys. It's hard in 2025, I look as a professional wrestler, just to please everyone. I know you can't please everyone, but you can certainly try. But a name change needs to work and resonate with the wrestler. If they want to work with that name to make it a fresh coat of paint onto what they've already created. That was the beneficial of the likes of Seth Rollins, the likes of Dean Ambrose, etc., etc., etc. You know, Vince McMahon saw them. I mean, Trips saw them. Yeah, fair enough. And then now Trips is in power, and see them as their go-to. That's the reason why I feel like at times it's hard for wrestlers to go from a release clause of their contracts where they're released and then go back on the indies to build up the name. As far as I can remember, the only names I feel like have actually built up their name, Drew McIntyre, well, Drew Galloway, whatever you want to class it as. You've got the likes of Cody Rhodes, Matt Cardona. Those are the three that stand out to me that are building up their names. Two are signed back to WWE. Matt Cardona has not gone back to WWE, but he's still building up his name. Don't get me wrong. He put a fresh coat of paint on what they gave him in WWE with Zack Ryder. That should live and prove that you can build your success from success. You know, it's gone about turn, where he's literally refreshed his old career, rebuilt his old career on the independent scene for over 5 years now. You know, I'm not surprised he's not signed back. This is not chastising the guy. But it depends on the climate with the WWE. You know, but with a name change, for namesake, I'm hoping if he did go back to WWE, they don't say, oh yeah, you need to go back to Zack Ryder. You know, that'll be a hindrance to the guy that has refreshed his whole career. But from being released to being where he is. You know? And it just blows my mind to think if a wrestler has a name, it needs to work. You know? To help sell that story, pardon the pun for Cody Rhodes. But I don't mean that. It helps to sell the story if it's a believable name. You know? And that's just me being honest. When a wrestler has to change their name, it needs to work. You know, you look at the wrestlers that are the past and present that have not actually worked. And they're literally still struggling now. You know, and that just baffles me. It baffles me how a wrestler... Oh, God. Sorry about that creaking. I feel bad as that, the way my chair does actually feel. But that's what I mean. For a name change to work, it needs to work. You know, I feel like that JC Mateo will grow on people. That's just me being honest. You know, I've already dubbed him as the new Shield of the WWE. And it seems that way. Just the way it is at the moment with the likes of Jeff Cobb. But let's just see how this pans out. You know, I'm really intrigued to see how it goes. But anyway, guys, I'm off now. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the 15 already. And thank you ever so much for interacting with me. Until next time, catch you guys soon.